The year was 1871, a time of great unrest. The war had torn through cities, villages, and countrysides, leaving destruction in its wake. Young Captain Elias Carter, a hardened soldier of the Union Army, led his regiment through the war-torn plains, where the echoes of cannon fire and musket shots filled the air like a haunting melody. The war was brutal, but Elias had seen worse. He had fought in battles where the ground turned red, where men fell like leaves in autumn. Yet this war was different. It was a battle for survival, a fight against not just the enemy, but also the very land that sought to consume them. The orders were clear. Hold the line at Fort Ashmore, deep in enemy territory. The fort, built on the ruins of an old colonial outpost, was a strategic stronghold. If it fell, the enemy would march uncontested into the heart of the nation. It was a battle they could not afford to lose. Chapter 2. Into the Inferno. The march to the fort was treacherous. The soldiers waded through rivers, trudged through thick forests, and climbed rocky terrain. Each step was accompanied by the distant thunder of battle. Some men had grown weary, their faces pale from hunger and exhaustion. As they neared Fort Ashmore, Lieutenant Samuel Greene, Elias's closest friend, rode beside him. "Do you ever wonder, Elias, if we will ever see home again?" Samuel asked. Elias clenched his jaw. "Home is where the war takes us now, Samuel. But we must win this fight if we ever hope to return." By nightfall, they reached the fort. The sight before them was grim. Bodies of fallen soldiers lay scattered, their weapons still clutched in lifeless hands. The enemy had already begun their siege. Smoke curled into the night sky from burning wagons and shattered barricades. "Man the walls! Prepare for battle!" Elias roared, his voice cutting through the chaos. The soldiers scrambled into position, muskets and cannons aimed at the enemy camp below. 1,000 enemy troops stood ready, their banners waving in the cold wind. The battle was imminent. Chapter 3. The First Attack. At dawn, the enemy attacked. They came like a relentless tide, storming the walls with rifles, bayonets, and sheer determination. Gunfire cracked through the air, explosions rocked the earth, and the screams of the wounded filled the battlefield. Elias stood firm at the front lines, his sword gleaming as he led his men in repelling the attack. Samuel fought beside him, fending off wave after wave of enemy soldiers. The battle turned into a desperate struggle, with the defenders pushing back every assault. Amidst the bloodshed, a young soldier, Private Jonathan Hayes, clutched his bleeding arm, his face contorted in pain. "Hold on, Hayes," Elias shouted, dragging him to safety behind the barricades. The field surgeon worked frantically, tying bandages as more wounded poured in. As the battle raged on, Elias caught sight of the enemy commander, General Wilhelm Krauss, orchestrating the attack from a hilltop. If they could take him out, they might cripple the enemy's advance. "Samuel, we need to take that hill," Elias ordered. With a small force, they launched a daring counterattack, breaking through enemy lines and climbing the hill under heavy fire. Musket balls whizzed past, but they pressed on. Reaching the top, Elias engaged in a brutal duel with Krauss. Their swords clashed, sparks flying as they fought with deadly precision. At last, Elias delivered the final blow, sending Krauss tumbling to the ground. The enemy, leaderless and demoralized, began to retreat. Chapter 4. The Cost of Victory. The battle was won, but the cost was great. Half of Elias's men lay dead or wounded. The fort stood, battered but unbroken. As the sun set, Elias stood among the fallen, his heart heavy. War had claimed so many lives, and yet it was not over. He knew more battles awaited, more sacrifices to be made. Samuel placed a hand on his shoulder. "We held the line, Elias. We did what we had to." Elias nodded. But at what cost? As night fell, the surviving soldiers gathered, lighting torches in honor of their fallen comrades. The flames flickered in the darkness, a symbol of resilience, of the will to fight on, even in the face of despair. The war was far from over, but for now, they had won. And so, the echoes of valor carried on, whispering their story into the annals of history.